Welcome to AGS 405, Consultancy for Farming Systems. Jeff McCormick here with you today. And first of all, we're going to work our way through what are we meaning by consultancy and what does it look like for our farming systems to be a consultant in today's world. So first of all, we'll just grab a definition of what is consultancy. And if we take a simple one from the Macquarie Dictionary, a consultant is someone who gives professional or expert advice. And so note the words professional or expert. There's a technical level of knowledge that's required, and they're giving advice to the person who has employed them. So we could say a farm consultant is a professional advisor on agricultural techniques, and commonly or usually one in private practice. There are differences to that, but it's a professional advisor, and we're talking about agricultural techniques or technical knowledge. That's really what a consultant is. Now, one of the other things that I would add for, if we were to talk about being a consultant for farming systems, is generally there's a fee involved. There's a payment involved somewhere. We'll get to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Because if we have a brief history of consultancy for farming systems, consultants in agriculture haven't really been around for a long time as we know them today. Originally, the people who were giving advice to growers were really some sort of government extension officer. Now, in Australia, that was primarily from the state departments of agriculture, whether it was New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia. They all had what they'd call extension departments. Within New South Wales, regionally, there was district agronomists, and those people would regularly be giving advice to farmers. Now, that happened over a long period of time. If we think about the situation here in Wagga, the original Wagga experimental farm was set up in the 1890s, and it had a long history of giving advice to farmers. Now, it was doing both things. It was doing the research, and it was also extending that information to farmers. And so that's how it had been for a long time. Now, if you travel overseas to other countries that are lower income than ours and with an agricultural sector that's continuing to develop, you'll find there's a real importance still on these government extension officers to do the work. But over time in Australia, there has been a movement away from these government extension officers, and you can still find some roles at the moment in New South Wales within the local land services. There's still an extension capability, but it's still a little bit different to what it used to be. But primarily on farms, where are they getting their advice from? We're probably more likely to call them consultants now. And really, they are earning some money or a fee for the work that they are doing. Now, that happens in different ways, and we'll get to talk about that in a little while. But they are doing that work for a fee, whereas the government extension officers were paid by the government to go and extend information. The first sort of change that started to happen was this idea about sales agronomists. And I've linked this here with the arrival of pesticides. Now, in the 60s, there were some pesticides starting to arrive on the scene, like 2,4-D, the hormone herbicides. In the 70s, there were some other herbicides coming, much in the way of gramoxone or spray seed, the diquat, paraquat kinds of herbicides. Probably the real change in my mind is in that early to mid 1980s, when glyphosate became affordable to local farmers. That changed our system completely. In terms of a production sense, it's changed it completely because we no longer needed tillage to create a seed bed to manage weeds prior to sowing. We could use a herbicide to do that, and it really marked the arrival of direct drilling. But on top of that, through the 1980s, the arrival of a range of different pesticides came, and early on, the government extension officers were providing some advice around these products, but soon the companies that were selling these products locally, so we might describe them as being resellers. So today we still have those companies, whether it's Elders or Nutrient, Delta Ag, Ag and Vet, those kinds of places. They were providing the product for the farmers to apply, and very early on they started providing the advice for the use of those products. Now, understandably, I think government extension officers don't want to provide that advice over time because there's a risk with those products in terms of their efficacy, and so there could be a insurance risk, whereas private companies who are providing those products stepped in to fill that gap to give advice to farmers on how to use these newly arrived products. And then over time, from the 80s onwards, we started to see some fee-for-service consultants arrive. And I'm describing this as it's really a desire for independence. So these service or fee-for-service consultants, and they might charge their fees in a range of different ways, but they can be seen as being separate from the products that are being sold. And therefore, there's a level and an extra level of independence there, that they're not coming with a bias. They're not coming with a pallet load of chemicals to sell. You should be getting completely independent advice. And so we've seen that area grow over time, and it's kind of grown into sort of different areas as well. And it might be an agronomist, it might be business. Some companies do both the agronomy and the farm business. And then you also have some livestock consultancy as well. Within Australia, the agronomy consultancy is probably the main form of consultancy that's occurring. There's definitely business consulting going on where people look at the entire business and provide advice for that. The livestock enterprise component, there's different areas of that are serviced by consultants, but in the main, there probably isn't as many livestock consultants around as what there would be agronomy consultants. Now, just something to note here, because I have said that the fee-for-service consultants was a drive for independence. The reality, and my experience with working with the sales agronomists, is that their advice in terms of the application of products and what should be done in the particular field is rarely biased by products that they need to sell. And the reality is that all the places, all the reselling companies that have the products, they all have the same or similar sorts of products. So over time, I've become less skeptical of the independence of the sales agronomists. There's a large number of sales agronomists out there who do a really good job for their growers and provide excellent advice. The other thing that I want to put in your mind is thinking about where the money comes from. When we think about, because remember we talked about consultancy providing advice, and I said for a fee. Now, it's clear for the fee-for-service consultant that they're charging for their time, or they could charge per acre rate, depending on what they're doing. But where's the money come from the sales agronomist? Ultimately, it is from the products that get sold. Generally speaking, the advice from the agronomist is free. That depends on the situation, and it depends on the individual client. There's definitely fee-for-service agronomy work happening within those reselling stores that still sell products, and it sort of depends on the crop a little bit more. A rain-fed cropping situation will probably tend to have more free advice with the money coming from a product. Whereas when you get into industries like cotton, where there's an intensive scouting of paddocks during the season, they're much more likely to be a fee-for-service model. So although I've separated all these things out, there's definitely overlap between them. So the question you need to ask is, why would farmers want a consultant? So it could be adding skills that a farmer does not have. And so that's one benefit, to bring in those skills to your farm. But I think we really need to remember, a lot of the farmers I deal with are really very cluey. They're very quick to understand. They really know their farming business. And if they had the time, I've no doubt that they could learn all the information that the consultant's bringing. Okay, so we shouldn't think, in a sense here, that the farmer can't know that knowledge. It's probably associated with a time factor, that they have lots of other things going on and they want to bring in something that they don't currently have the skills for, and they probably don't currently have the time to learn it themselves. So it's providing time that a farmer does not have. Essentially, it's outsourcing. There's lots of things going on a farm. There's the practical, the physical, the sowing the crops, machinery, those kinds of things. There's the business side of things. All right, making sure that the farm runs as a business, keeping the books up to date, paying salaries, all those kinds of things. There's marketing of products, getting the best price for the product that you've grown. And then there's that crop management or pasture management that also needs to occur. It's difficult for a farmer to be an expert in all of those, and it's difficult for a farmer to have the time to all of those. So in a sense, getting a consultant in, they are outsourcing. They're saying, I'm going to bring someone in with skills in that particular area, because that's better value for money than for me training up to get that knowledge, because I just don't have the time anyway. There is a sense that a consultant provides decision-making support. There are lots of decisions to be made on farm in all sorts of different areas, whether that is around the business or finance or marketing, whether it's around machinery, whether it's just the logistics, how to get the trucks in to get rid of the grain, how to bring the fertilizer in, and then what am I going to do for an individual paddock to make sure that I manage that in a way that I am able to get yield. There's lots of decisions on farm. And what I've seen in the past is that a consultant provides often a decision-making support, because a lot of these decisions actually cost a lot of money. If you're deciding to apply a new pesticide of some description and the grower is unfamiliar with it and it's costing $40 a hectare and it's a significant investment, all right, the consultant can say, yep, I've used this herbicide a number of times, we do it in this way, it's safe to the crop, and you'll get good weed control and those kinds of things. There's also this idea of decision fatigue. If we have a look at this figure on the right-hand side of the screen, we have the number of decisions in a day on the x-axis, and we have the quality of those decisions. And you can see the more decisions you have to make, really the poorer and the poorer quality that they will be. And I've felt this before in terms of, particularly in my field of doing more research, you're making lots of decisions, there's lots of things going on, you make a decision in a paddock which turns out at the end of the season to be the wrong decision. We are limited in our capacity to keep making really good decisions. And so a consultant comes in and provides some decision-making support around that. One thing to appreciate, and I've touched on this a little bit more previously, is that this is not about the farmer not having the ability to know these things. All right. It's just that they don't have time to keep across all the things that are changing, all the new things, or they just don't have the experience. So here's the comment here that I picked up from somewhere. It's not that as a consultant that you know more, but you've seen more. If we go back to that example of the farmer applying a new pesticide, maybe they might do that on one of their paddocks that 1 year. So they do it once. Whereas a consultant might have 20 to 30 growers. So they might have seen the application of that pesticide maybe 30 to 50 times. They've seen more. It's not that they know more necessarily, but they've got more experience in it because this is what they do all the time. And so we need to, in many respects, respect the knowledge and the wisdom that farmers that we're working with have. But we need to appreciate they just don't, because most of their decisions are based on their farm, they just don't see these things happening repeatedly. So it gives them less confidence to act, whereas the consultant might have done it multiple times, and that gives them more confidence to make that decision and support the grower through that decision. So when we're thinking about agricultural consultancy, I see it on a bit of a spectrum. No one end is better than the other, but there's a difference in how they operate, and it's something useful for us to appreciate. So we have the sales agronomist down here at one end, and we have the agricultural business consultancy at the other end, and fee for service will fit somewhere in the middle. Now, why do I put this along this spectrum? Is really because as we move from left to right, there's an increasing depth of understanding of that particular agricultural business. If we look at the extremes, the consultancy around agricultural business, there's some consultancy companies out there that literally take all of the financial data that those farms have and assess how they're performing. They are what you might call really quite integrated. There is a very deep understanding of everything that is happening in that business. So there is that integration there. At the other end, if we look at the sales agronomist to go to the other extreme, it is possible for, and this wouldn't normally be the case, but it's possible for a farmer to ring up a company and say, I want someone to come out and look at one paddock and give me a recommendation. And that sales agronomist will go to that paddock, have a look what's going on. They might make a recommendation of herbicide or fertilizer or something like that. And that's it in terms of their communication or their interaction with the grower. So they're much less they're much less involved with the full agricultural business. Now, it's likely that different farming consultants will find themselves on a different point on this spectrum. And it depends. It depends on relationships that are grown up over a long period of time. So you might be the sales agronomist, but you might do all the work on that farm, and you might have conversations about how the business is running. So you'll find yourself further along this spectrum. And so just want you to appreciate there's a wide range in terms of what the consultants are providing for their growers. It doesn't make it better or worse. It just means that your expectations of being how involved you are in the business, but also how you're going to pay for your time doing that. So let's talk about what is consultancy. I'm going to say it is providing advice for a fee, and we've described that that could be a per hour rate, or it could be products. So the advice might be free, but you will sell them products. The advice is generally seen as being independent. So it's not biased by anything else that's happening on the outside. And that's a really important aspect for growers, being able to know that they're getting independent advice. Now, clearly, the independent consultant for agriculture who is charging a fee for their service should really be quite independent. But on the other hand, as I mentioned, the sales agronomist, relatively speaking, is still independent in terms of the advice that they are giving. The consultant is independent of the business. What do I mean by that? Is that they're not actually working in the business. They're not making the day-to-day decisions in the business. They are independent, almost like they're having an outside look at what is going on. They are working for the client first and foremost. They are working for the client. What do I mean is that a consultant's job is really to achieve the goals of what the client wants. It's not to achieve the goals of the consultant. If they've got some particular ideas or bias in how things should be done, actually the consultant is there to provide a service so that their client can reach their goals. And a really important factor that we need to remember is a consultant needs to be adding value for the client. They need to provide a benefit. If you think about fee-for-service advice, maybe that's costing that farm $10,000 a year. Well, hopefully that the advice that is given is bringing in $50,000 more because it's good advice and it's resulting in improved either production or profitability on that farm. Because most of the farms systems that people are working with are family-owned farms. So if there's $10,000 there, that could go to children's school fees. It could go to a holiday of some description. It could go to all sorts of places, but they've chosen to spend it on you, and you need to provide value. You need to be making sure that what they're taking away is more than if you weren't there at all. And so providing value, adding value for the client is a really important aspect there. So there's really two dimensions of consultancy, all right? There's two things that you're doing as a consultant. One is this technical advice. And we could list off a whole range of technical skills, whether that's in cropping, pastures, livestock, business, those kinds of things. You are bringing technical skills to it, and that's why they're looking for your advice. But there's a really large human dimension to consultancy. You need to know your client, understand what makes them tick. Why are they going to change practice? What's the thing that drives them? What's the goal? What's their family situation like? How do they work? All those kinds of things. As a consultant, you need to know both. As a graduating student, just out of an agricultural degree, it is likely that the technical component will seem like the big mountain to climb. To become an expert in this, that seems really big. But I can tell you after a while, the tricky part is dealing with people, understanding your client and what makes them tick. Why will they follow your advice? What's their goals? What's really driving them in terms of their farming business? And so both are really, really important. If you are a consultant and you do not understand your client, you will not be a consultant for very long at all. In the next little lecture, we'll run through these a lot more specifically, but this is really the basic approach to consultancy. And this is probably more thinking in terms of the spectrum of a consultant that's more integrated or has a greater depth of what's going on with that farming system. So there's going to be an initial contact, often a phone call, where you'll speak to each other, find out a little bit what they want from you and expectations and those kinds of things. And then it's likely that you would visit them to collect information. And it depends on the nature of this consultancy. If it's over a specific problem, you'll be collecting information around that. If it's looking to take over providing advice for all of their cropping enterprise as such, well, you're probably getting a bigger picture of their farm. If the consultancy is about a particular problem or the farm business or something like that, you'll go away and you'll do some analysis on that. to determine for yourself which way is the best way forward, and then you'd come back with some recommendations, providing the grower a direction in which they should go. And then lastly, there's always follow-up. You need to keep coming back to that grower to see how they are going on it. And follow-up's important because it means that you care more than just the consultancy that you just did. And it really speaks to people when people follow up with them to see how they went with that, what's going on, and it's likely to end up in some return business. So we'll come back and break those down all a little bit further in the next short lecture. So let's talk about some skills in consultancy. In the framework of agriculture, there's a whole bunch of technical skills. It could be the agronomy, the soil science, the livestock management, agricultural business. All right, they're all important disciplines in their own right. There's a real technical component. But we could also talk about benchmarking, particularly in the agricultural business. You'll find consultants that do have benchmarking programs where they are able to line up all the farms and see where they kind of sit to be clear on how they're performing. But there's a whole range of other skills in consultancy. It could be around technical writing. It'll definitely be in public speaking. Whether you're speaking to growers, 3 to 5 growers, or whether you're speaking to 100, public speaking will always be a component. You might have to manage projects. You might have to facilitate meetings. You might have to write for tenders. There's time management, analysis of complete systems, and there's problem solving. So depending on the type of consultancy that you're doing, actually, there's a wide range of skills that you need to master to be able to do it effectively. So the question is where does the money come from in this? We've talked about the fee-for-service idea, but there's also, particularly if you're an independent consultant, there's the opportunity to earn more money. So we've talked client fee for service, and that could be an hourly fee, okay, or it could be done on a per acre or per hectare basis. What we need to appreciate, though, particularly in the rain-fed cropping systems, and particularly in the very broad acre, and if you've got clients scattered around and there's large amounts of driving in between, it can be difficult to make money out of that. If you have to drive an hour to a client and you're only there for 2 hours, it's hard to demonstrate your value there if you charge them for all of that time. And so I've known private independent agronomists who have said to me that time in the car on the road is still work time because they got to make phone calls, they got to make their way pay, and that's an important component. You could apply for a range of different tenders. All right, that could be extension information. So a group like GRDC or MLA might want you to speak to growers about different agricultural practices, and you could apply for that and they would pay you to be able to do that. There's research. There's a whole bunch of commercial research out there. So it could be GRDC or MLA, or it could be private companies, like particularly the chemical companies and those kinds of things, much more commercial focused research that you might want to undertake. And then there could be simply report writing. Someone wants to know something about something. And so you could write a tender for that and be successful and provide a report, an analysis of whatever issue they're looking into to help them in their decision making to do that. And so when we think about consultants, we can think more than just the farmer paying you for your services. There's other sources of payment out there, particularly with government and RDCs providing some work for them, and also that commercial companies with products to do some work with them. There's expert witnesses, so that's mainly related around court cases and So you could provide that expert witness and provide for them in that. And then there's ultimately selling products. And selling products, as we've said, that's more of the sales agronomist role. But it's, in some ways, it's easier and more straightforward for those agronomists to make money out of the products, because making money just purely out of advice can be a difficult thing to do. So I'm going to leave it there for now. Hopefully that's given you a reasonable introduction into consultancy and what we're thinking about. And we're going to keep jumping in further into the course to see where we go from there. I'll catch you later. Bye.